I think we are ready to roll. Hello, everybody, and welcome to my dog barking out there just at the exact instant that the stream went live. We are here for the very last day of Devember and New Year's Eve as well. Happy New Year to everybody that might be watching this after the fact, or if you happen to be watching it live now, you're probably in a part of the world that's already experienced its New Year. But for me, it's just 8 o'clock at night, so I have not quite hit there yet. Uh, Mr. Barky McBarkerson coming in to visit. Hello, Barky Pete. Hello. Did you tell the people in the hallway to get lost? He's not full of New Year's cheer. Anyway, we're going to be working on YouTuberizer for one more night, at least partially. Maybe we'll skive off into doing some other stuff, see how things take us, but we do have to do some amount of work here inside of YouTuberizer. What for? Being the Devember project. And remember that just because Devember is over does not mean that uh, I'm going to stop working on this particular package. Just means that uh, we're not going to be working explicitly on this. We can actually feel free to jump and do any other thing that we might like. Hello, Ashwin. Happy New Year. I imagine you are in the part of the world that is experiencing the joy that is no longer being in 2020. I think because I was watching some people play Minecraft earlier and they celebrated their New Year's on Twitch by blowing up their world in Minecraft. So we're going to work a little bit on some YouTuberizer tonight. I got a couple of things I'd like to play with and see what we can get going, see where we go from there. And we'll see where things take us. But I guess everything starts with the pushing of the magic button. And hello, fellow Sublime Text fanatics. Welcome to Devember's live stream, the Devember 31st live stream for the very last day of Devember, working on YouTuberizer one more time in this month. And I never mentioned in the original intro here, let me just move myself back to the appropriate part of the screen, but there's a pretty good chance that the Tuesday live stream that would normally happen in the start of the new year is not going to happen. We're probably going to let 1 week slide before we get back into stuff because I got a lot of games that I'd like to play and I've been really busy working on stuff. I need a little bit of time to relax somewhat. Although I haven't been at work for November, I have been spending time working on packages every night and also having to create videos and such. Speaking of which, oh yeah, Ashwin says 1st of January here. Happy New Year to you too in advance. Indeed, we're ringing it in style, writing Python code here in a live stream. I don't know if it's probably not immediately apparent, but my light stands came, and they are the thing right there. Seems pretty inconsequential, but I did some test recording stuff in the new recording area, working out camera angles and lighting. And I got to say, these things are pretty sweet. Not the greatest thing in the world, but not the worst either. Definitely. For my purposes, absolutely perfect. Would highly recommend. If I was a gigging photographer, I might want something a little bit more sturdy. But if I was a gigging photographer, I would probably be, wanting the fanciest possible equipment, and I just need something to make my face and shirts look nice. The nice thing about this is that you'll actually get to see the full shirt logo because I'm not hiding behind a desk. I'm standing behind a table that is up. Well, it's a standing desk. Anyway, something to look forward to there. I was going to prepare some photos and I forgot, but yeah. Also, if you happen to be not a member of the Discord today, my other YouTube channel, link down in the description, blah blah blah, hit the magic threshold for being able to join the YouTube Partner Program, which means, in theory, if everything is uh, all worked out after some period of time, I could theoretically actually monetize videos on the channel, which is something that I never set out to do. I wasn't planning on doing that by any stretch of the imagination, but I've been receiving mails from YouTube lately that say that they're going to start monetizing videos on channels, even if they're not part of the partner program. Basically, as I understand this, because I'm a YouTube Prime member, YouTube Plus, YouTube Red, whatever the thing is where I pay some amount of money to get access to uh, YouTube Music, and as a result, I also don't see ads on YouTube. Previously, it was Google Play Music, but then they switched it. Anyway, I've always had the channel set to don't show ads on anything because I don't think anybody needs to see any ads. Presumably, nobody is, but I can't really verify that on my particular content. And I wanted to keep it that way because I'm not doing this to make myself $1 million or anything. I just want to help people and promote the message that Sublime Text is sublime. But I've been seeing some communications from Google that indicates that they're going to start putting ads in videos and they're going to take that setting away. And if that's the case, if YouTube is going to be dropping video ads into videos anyway, then I'm for sure going to click the button to maybe something comes my way, because why should Google earn all of the money on all of the cool content that I'm creating? But we'll see how that all works out. But it was a pretty exciting New Year's Day present, if you will, to notice that the little indicator that I have in the top of my YouTube had the 4K hours in green instead of black like it was before, because it rounds and it actually crested the minimum requirements for being able to do something. Still a little ways away from actually being able to take any action on such a thing, but it was pretty exciting nonetheless. So let's see. The thing that I'm thinking of doing here, and I'm not entirely sure how well it'll work. We've got to see. I think I've done something similar to this in Override Audit, is trying to track whether or not something is dirty uh, from a plugin, basically so that when we do the edit action in the YouTube video, which is stuff we worked on in the other live stream on Tuesday and that I cleaned up a little bit yesterday, I want the command to be grayed out. In fact, we could probably get a little something going for one of the things I modified. Essentially, if you didn't see the devlog, and thanks Ashwin for pointing out that I uploaded the video. I typed in the title, the description, the tags, set the thumbnail, and then told it to publish. And then when I clicked save, everything updated and saved except for the privacy status. Thanks, YouTube. That's not the first time that's happened. I'm assuming that I'm doing something wrong by assuming that clicking, make public and save is all the stuff that needs to be. Actually, there's one extra button press in there. You got to confirm that the thing that you changed was the thing that you changed before you click to confirm that you want to save. More reasons to use YouTuberizer, right? But this operation here, when we choose this operation to edit something, uh, it very specifically refetches the details, which is not anything new, but also it drops that particular video from the cache by making the request and saying, please refresh this, so that it always refetches things. The idea there being that we do not want to accidentally clobber over changes just because we had something cached, right? So the thing that we're going to do here is kind of twofold. First of all, I don't necessarily like this commit changes to YouTube thing being in the context menu of all of these things. So rather it be bound to the save key, and we already have a context that allows tab to jump between these three views. So we already have a context exactly for that particular thing. The trick is I don't want these views to be regular views. I want them to be scratch views so that we're free to close this window without it saying, would you like to save this? And we want to get away from that. But at the same time, we want to be able to know that if we haven't made any changes in this thing, that we don't actually need to uh, have the save key actually do anything. And the only way to remove the dirty indicator from something is to actually run the save command and have it save. So that's not necessarily anything that helps us for being able to track that. One of the things we can track is the change count. Every time any buffer is modified, the change count goes up. Unfortunately, typing the letter A is a change, and undoing to go back is also a change. So it's really tricky to know when you undid something back to the point where there weren't any saved changes. Tricky business. I'm not entirely sure what the best way to go about this is. Ashwin says, no issues. I thought you uploaded the video by YouTuberizer. Oh, no, I don't have video uploading in this yet. I assume that must be possible. That and doing things like updating thumbnails, but that it wasn't the request that we were working with doesn't have that as a thing. So I'm assuming that there might be something in here for that. I guess it would be an insert. If we had an insert operation, we could upload a video and also set metadata. That might be something that I'm not interested in doing with Sublime, just because if I had to quit Sublime for some reason, my upload would crap out. But that is interesting. Oh, I guess thumbnails is a whole other business here. Interesting. Okay, well, that's something to potentially work out too. Mostly my use case for this is to edit existing videos and to prepare a new one by using the YouTube Studio to start the upload, and then I can just pistol whip through saying you just process it at your leisure. That automatically adds the video to be available in the API, and then I can modify changes here. If I have to go in and upload the thumbnail separately, that's not that big a deal. Although we actually have the ability to do something like this now where we didn't previously, because we can prompt with a dialog box to have the user pick the image before we actually proceed, which isn't something that was previously possible. Now, I was thinking right as the stream was starting, I had some theoretical potential way to mostly track whether or not something is modified or not. I can't remember what it was. In Override Audit, I have the ability to say create override, and when you pick one of these things, it inserts it. For some reason, partially lined down. That's nothing I'm doing here. But this is a scratch buffer right now. So if I was to make some changes, then we'll actually see it being modified. But if I undo, see the undo state doesn't go all the way back. The idea behind that, and I'm going to close that without saving, is that you might want to say create override and pick the file, and then you look at it, you decide I don't want to make an override, so you just close this and nothing happens, right? Because it's not actually associated with the file on disk until you save it. Those files are actually being sourced out of the package. But the way that I implemented this is it creates this buffer, makes it a scratch buffer, and then there's an on modified that turns scratch buffer status off, which allows it to actually start tracking changes. And then from that point, because you've made a change, you can do something. Now you can undo. Theoretically, there's an API thing in here that tracks the command history. I think, I can't remember what it's called, like so, returns command names, command arguments, and repeat counts for a given history thing. So you could theoretically keep calling this until you discover that the previous command was undo, and then you know that you're back at the state where you originally were. No matter how much I played with that previously, I've never managed to actually get that to do something that I want it to do. But I did have a theoretical idea. We might do something like this. If we said we want to, come on, a new plugin, and let's say on window command. I'm gonna guess no, probably on text command. And that would probably be a view command in args if I had to guess what the arguments for something like this is actually going to be. A view command named args. Cool. Ship that over to there so that we can actually do something with it. Let's do this. Print command, just so we can actually see this stuff. And we'll call this test thing because I'm very good at coming up with actual names. So that is not a text command. All right. Checking to see if save gets logged. So it's probably a window command, I guess. self window command args, and do the same thing as here, but let's comment that one out and throw in a pass instead. So it is a little quieter about that. Still not here. I seem to vaguely recall, just double check, that is catching window commands. Window command catches window commands and application commands, but I guess save not being a plugin command isn't one that you can actually listen for. I think I'm pretty sure now that I'm saying that we actually noticed this very thing. It's one of the reasons why if you want to stop someone from saving, the only way to do it is to override the key so that it doesn't execute the save command. The other question is, called when a view is about to be closed. I assume that because we can't return any value from this, we can't stop a view from being closed. I thought we might be able to do some sort of clever end run around having a view be scratch buffer until you make a modification and then turn it into a regular buffer so that it's not scratch. And every time you catch the save, you set it back to scratch. But I don't think that's actually what we want for this. So I'm going to say, is it worth creating a sample small plugin to test what it is we're trying to do before we get started with it? I don't think so. Let's go ahead and delete that. It's the commit details command itself that is responsible for actually doing the thing. Let's go ahead and edit details on a video so we actually have something to work with, like so. And of course that is eminently always visible, right? Let's see if we can move that over. That will be a little bit nicer. Oh, whoops. That one's the editor, that one's the body. Cool. Yeah, that's cool. What we need is to use the change count, which was this thing. And if we talk our way through this, any change whatsoever that's made to a buffer updates the change count by 1. So if we knew what the change count was before this commit details command was invoked, then we could enable or disable the command by checking the change count in all of the views in the window that we actually care about, which is the title, the body, and the description, or sorry, the title, body, and the tags, and only tell that the thing can be executed if the number is different. If it's the same, we don't care. The downside to that is, as I mentioned, if you were to type something and then undo, there's not a good way to go back to the state that you were in before. And I don't know necessarily how bad that is. I'm thinking of from the user perspective, you want to be able to know. This is one that I wish that there was a way to actually update the dirty indicator other than allowing the file to be persisted to disk. The only real way that we could do something like that is use view.retarget to make those views actually point at temporary files on disk. And then the act of saving could save the files and also update. But then we got to clean up those things when the plugin goes away. That seems a little heavy for something like this. I don't know that that's a good thing. Could the incremental diff API help in any way? I don't think we can actually check changes, what changes there might be. You can set the reference document or reset the reference document, but there's no way that I'm aware of to know where changes are other than to store the current viewport and selection state and then invoke the command to navigate and see if it went somewhere. Then you'd know if there was a change. And then you would have to soft undo that operation to be able to know that if the user actually undid something. And as we can see there, I undid the change that I made and it undid the soft undo as a part of that operation. So that's not necessarily the greatest way to go for something like that. The other thing that I thought might be interesting for something like this is a button in here or a command in here that is revert, that just gets it to refetch the details back into the same window, which would discard any changes that you might actually have, is another way to go about that. Uh, but there's no way that I know of to be able to close a tab with unsaved changes without prompting the user, which is not something that we want, short of backing it with a file. So we need to decide if we care about that. I don't want to get into trying to track commands for things. Maybe something like the new text change listener could allow you to determine that your document state was back in the state that it was when you snapshotted it, but that seems really hardcore. When realistically, all we need is for a way to modify the dirty buffer. Yeah, oh, there's another thing I was gonna check. Uh, the view change count of this is 0. If I make a change, I've already forgotten what it was I was gonna do. Now it's 1. I undo it. Now it's 2. If I undo again, it's still 2. So to some degree, if you take it back enough, that happens. If we tracked every time onModified was called and that counted the same as change count does, you could listen for the undo command to notice actually subtract 2 from the change count instead of 1. Is that something that would work? As we see here, one modification to the buffer causes it to go up, and an undo causes it to, well, an undo, if I actually do it in the right place, still causes it to go up. But if we had some sort of saved fudge factor that started at 0 and every time it saw the undo command, it bumped that value by 2, then theoretically you could grab the change count, modify it based on that value to know what the change count actually is, and then you could sort of undo the effect of making changes. If we redid, we get to a 5, and then if we undo, we get to 6. But the undo would count as 2. I think that would get us out of sync. We'd have to catch redo too. Yeah, Ashwin says it seems very hacky. It does. It seems very hacky and very janky. And I'm not entirely assured that uh, something like that 6, that's a lot of changes, but I don't necessarily know, is it literally change for change? Does it take, if you could type fast enough, would multiple edits count as 1 and not 2 for, for the number of characters added? That's not the sort of thing we know. This is not really what this thing is actually supposed to be for. which makes that very tricky indeed. So the simplest thing to do is store the change count and only enable the command when it's different, which would still allow you to commit changes up even if nothing actually changed. I guess going back to your notion of could we use the incremental diff? Not as such, because incremental diff is just something that we can turn on and off with the setting or set the document, the reference document that's being used, but we can't get the reference document. But there's no reason we can't store the content that existed in the view in actual setting. The ultimate goal is to have this command for commit changes to YouTube only be enabled if there has been a change. And if you were to type something and then undo to get that change to go away, then it's back to the place where it started. This should be not grayed out. And change count tells you how many times changes happen, but undoing doesn't decrement the change count to move it back to the history that you were at before. Undoing counts as a change. And I know that there's something that you can use to inspect the command history, the undo history, but I was never able to successfully track and undoing something to know when you eventually got back to before a modification was made with a little, say you keep like a checkpoint in the undo history. Maybe it's slightly easier now that undo history is stashed in the session. Nothing I want to deal with. Now, Ashwin, you mentioned the incremental diff. That's not something we can use for this because all we can do is set the document that it's using or reset the document that it uses to calculate based on the current thing. We can't ask it to tell us where changes are, but we can figure that out ourselves by actually storing the content of the view inside of a setting in said view. When this window populates and it puts text in, it could store the text that it added directly into that setting. And then anything that wants to know if there was a modification could check to see if substoring the content out is the same, which is also kind of janky and not something that I would do in the general case. But all three of these views are related to metadata in YouTube videos, and they have very specific maximum lengths that they're allowed to have. The largest of which is the body with 5,000 characters. And we never really get anywhere near that per se. So it seems like it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. We could do a twofer. We could check the change count and check the other thing, and only when the change count is different do we actually substir the data out to see. That might be the best way to go. The alternative to that is knowing that it knows initially that there's nothing to commit, and then you type something and then you change your mind. It still thinks that there's something to commit, which isn't the worst thing in the world, but we are talking about shipping data from this computer to another computer. And you always have that niggling doubt of, did I actually modify something here? So I think that might be the play. Is odd as it is. And we could further even optimize, well, not optimize, but protect ourselves by knowing that when we substir the value out of this, when we want to check to see if it's actually been modified at all, we could actually have an upper limit on how much data is pulled out so that it's not a lot. The dirty state goes away on a tab that is like, whoops, well, that's not going to work because this window doesn't have tabs, and now this window doesn't have tabs. I think. If we actually had a tab here, then when I do this, it goes to be, it tells you that it's dirty. When you undo it, it does indeed go back to knowing. However, the problem with that is in the case of, well, that window too, we can close that, is this happens, right? Uh, if this isn't a scratch buffer, then when you try to close the tab or you try to close the window, it asks you, there's changes. You want to save them? We don't want to have this in here. So that's the issue with that. And like the thing that I'm doing in override audit is creating a view and doing set scratch true, like so, which of course means no matter how much you modify this, it doesn't matter because it's scratch, it doesn't track. There's an on modified that tells it that when it goes, when you actually modify it for the first time, it turns the scratch status off. And notice that what it actually did here was mark that as being dirty still, which is something I tried to get around. If I do this and then set it to be scratch, it stops being dirty. But when you undo that back the other way, it remembers because the only thing that can change that flag is saving. So that's kind of the issue with that. So basically what we're trying to do is implement our own dirty handler, which is something that I was trying to do last November too, as a matter of fact, in that Encryptorizer package, which in fact may still be installed. For example, also an easier thing to implement now than we did previously because we can actually prompt the user for a file now, so you don't have to open it first. So yeah, I think that's what we want to do. So the thing that creates the window, if we think about this logically, let's look at all of the commands. New window creates a brand new window, makes the tabs hidden, sets the layout that we need, which is when that's stashed up there. And then if a video ID was provided, it's a window setting. If details for the video were provided, there's a setting. Then for the three views, we have the syntax that's applied, the setting, the name of the thing, uh, and the actual text that should get injected into there. And those all default to being empty things. Uh, so if this is what you get if you say new YouTube editor, new window like this. There still needs to be functionality to maybe associate this with something. Primarily, this is what we would actually do if we were going to upload a video from here, which is why this command exists. And I was using it for testing of some stuff. Secondarily, when you say edit video details, this one goes through all of the rigmarole of either taking a video ID explicitly or getting you to browse one. So if you were given a video ID, it fetches the value directly. Otherwise, it gets the channel list and kicks off a whole big, pick a playlist, pick a tag, pick a video before it says picked video and then gets the video details. And we can see here what this actually does is call the new window command and give it the appropriate information. And then also there's a timeout in here to actually load the thumbnail in. So this thing is responsible for either way putting data in. So an extra thing that we could put in here is something that says upstream content or something as a setting that puts the same text in as this was put in. And then commit video details, one of the things it could check is the text that's in here different than the text that's upstream, and we only need to upload this thing if it's different in some fashion. And then every time this actually does something, we have to remember to update the setting as well. And we would also use the tracking of change count for this, store the last change count. That way, for the cases where you didn't type something, it just automatically knows that it doesn't even need to basically waste the time to fetch a string out to compare it to know that it's the same, because we can sort of short circuit that. Once we get that working, then we're ready to go on this other stuff. Actually, we also want revert in here too, don't we? Is it worth doing that first? I don't think so. So for this in the reversed list of these things, because the groups are created in the reverse order to the way that we actually want them. So we actually need to go bottom up on these things in order to get stuff to do what we want. And interestingly, we're actually creating 4 groups when we do this, but the way that I created the layout, the pane to the right, there the thumbnail is always the 4th one, even though you might think it goes 1, 2, 3, 4. Interesting the way that the set layout command, lays out the cells, although it makes sense when you look at how that actually works. So each one of these things is going to set either the title, the description, or the tags. That's what the body is, like so. And these are this lets us know that it's a YouTube view, which is distinct from knowing that it's in a YouTube window, which is the setting up here. I'm kind of surprised that I let these settings slide. Oh, that's what we have there. Yeah. Those ones actually allow it to see. I think this one is actually used by our key binding for tab. Um, let's do this. Well, got a lot of those going, don't I? Theoretically, that's going to kind of do what we want. We're going to need to, whoops, close this window and then do it again. Edit video details for our guinea pig end card video. I've already forgotten what the setting is. YTE content. Content. And yep, that is totally content. So that works. I mean, did we expect it not to? Never let it be said that I didn't not trust myself to do a thing. These things need to go in a specific order. Specifically, it needs to set the syntax and set scratch. Let's say that we set the syntax, set scratch, set name, and then append the content in. Then set up the settings to say that whichever one of these things it is, that's true. I think this one, again, is probably for the key binding and because I didn't want to have 3 different versions of it. That sets the context menu setting. That's something specific. We set this, and then we say view.settings. Oops. YTE change count, let's say. Feeling our way through here, which should be that's on the view returns the current change count. Every time the buffer is modified, it's incremented. So that is one last thing to do here. Technically, I don't think we even really need to do. We don't really need to do it. We're gonna assume that we haven't done it, but we do want to do it just to make things a little bit nicer. So those are the 2 things. I'm just going to go ahead and we don't need that one. Store those over there so we can remember those particular settings. Yeah, settings, YouTube view. I'm surprised that I did use the underscore on that, but I guess because it's user facing, that's when you're actually supposed to know about these ones with the underscores on them, or ones that I did that way because they're internal to the plugin. They're supposed to provide a hint to you if you happen to be browsing the session that you probably shouldn't be noodling with that thing. So if we had those particular settings, I'm gonna say This is something that the thing that we're doing here probably should be a utility function, because maybe something that's not this command might want to know if there are any changes. Maybe. But we can implement it in here to see, right? That is big. Pardon me. Dev group has changes, and then we say window and group, and say return false, like this. Okay, so that's the minimum thing, right? Check the first view in the given group of the provided window to see if it has any changes made to it. This requires that the tracking variables that we use to know about changes in our Scratch YouTube editor buffers have been set up, which more or less means this, one test. We need to say view is equal to window dot. This is something that I did previously, isn't it? But not here. I know, I'm actually doing this in the wrong place. Crap. That's an unfortunate set of circumstances there, Lemony Snicket. We actually want that to be in this one. Pardon me. Put the cursor in the wrong spot in that one. Do you know if there's any way to have expand selection to scope, but instead of selecting, it gives the region info instead? For example, if the cursor was here and we did this and you wanted to know that region, which is that one, try this. Oh, whoops. That's one way to do it. Extract scope returns the extent of the syntax scope name assigned to the character at the given point. So if you're inside of here, for some cases, that'll do what you want. You may or may not get into finicky edge cases if you're in a situation where there's metascopes applied as well for some parts and not others. Maybe, maybe not. I guess the faster test would be to do something like that, right? Sublime plugin.window command. Is that what you would expect this to do? That really seems like that's probably at the basis of what that's actually doing, except that this spirals ever outward in a way that that method won't. So you would need to do something like call extract scope for the particular point where this is just the place where the first cursor is. That gives you a region. And then you compare that against the actual selected text. And if they're the same, then you need to bump one of the ends of the region left or right by one and do the scope thing from that one and join them together. Something like that. My main use case is within strings. However, if the cursor is at the end of the string, it doesn't give the entire string info. No, it doesn't, because that's got a different scope than everything else, right? Because that particular one has the punctuation scope on it. You need to go one back in that case. Fun fact, you might notice in HyperHelp, every time you navigate it to a new anchor, it selects it and the cursor appears on the left-hand side of the selection and not the right-hand side of the selection. That's 100% because of this thing that you're experiencing here. If the cursor is over on this side, then the scope is the scope of the anchor that's inside of it. But over here, it's not. It's the anchor end instead of the other bit, the meta anchor that we want to actually have happen there. And I can't remember. I have a reason why this also doesn't have the metascope applied to it, and I imagine it's because we need to be able to do find by selector meta.anchor to find all of them, and we actually want to know just this part. We don't want to do this and then have to adjust every one of them in by one on the ends, particularly because it's possible for there to be an anchor that's actually hidden, in which case these characters aren't here, and it's even harder for you to tell if that's the case. But yeah, I would say some combination of extract scope would possibly do something for you. For your particular case, if you did it and you could actually check the scope at this thing, and if it matches the punctuation scope, you could actually move it back one character to see. And if that's still punctuation, then it's an empty string and you don't care. Something along those lines, I would think. This is the thing that we want to have here. We need a view that's going to be that views in group, the very first thing. So if view.changeCount is equal to the int of view.settings.get YTE change count, and let's say -1. You were thinking of that? Yeah. This is probably the subject of other plugin 101 videos at some point. Working with scopes from inside of a plugin, which is something that we've really only ever touched on in the Simple Notes plugin video series from like 2 years ago, where I implemented it originally so that the syntax would highlight things that are tags for you to do something with, and then also the code has its own version of that. And one of the issues with that is if you modify the syntax, you have to modify the code too, but you get two birds with one stone, because if you rely on the syntax to work that way, there's only one regex, and then also plugins gain the ability to just navigate more natively, which is like a cool thing, I would think. What's going on here? Hands down, one of the best cakes I got to write. That is a funny cake. I'm not going to share it on the stream because it has an expletive in it, but it's somebody welcoming 2021 and providing a special dedicated message to 2020 about not wanting it to be around anymore. Let's print a log here. Print checking group blah. Okay. Change count is is still the same. All right. One thing that we can do here. Okay. So the what we're trying to do here again is kind of replicate the idea, whoops, of a dirty thing that a dirty flag that we can track without having to actually make the file not be scratched, because there's no way to block the save command except to not let the user run it. The save command is the only way to actually update that. And if we wanted to be able to track whether or not there's changes, we can't stop Sublime from complaining about you wanting to save the file. It has indeed. I mean, I'm sort of on the higher side of the scale of how things went in 2020 because, yeah, there's been like a lot of, life in general is the poop, as we say. As a matter of fact, life in general sort of got one of these. Uh, but on the flip side, I was already working from home anyway as part of my job, so that part didn't impact me quite as much. We don't generally tend to go out a lot, so that being in lockdown wasn't quite as bad because we are sort of in the habit of not going out anyway. But there's still definitely a mental toll knowing that even if you wanted to go out, still not a good idea. But um, on the flip side, the channel is doing ridiculously well. I mean, I cracked 1,000 subs. I never thought in a million years that would happen. Just today, I don't know if you're here for the. Well, you're in the Discord, so you probably noticed the message. But I actually hit a point where I could actually be monetized now. Well, I think I probably mentioned that previously. But if you're new to the stream for right now, I could theoretically monetize my other channel. I wouldn't have imagined that that counted either, unless it's counting the number of hours that I look at my own videos too. Because whenever I share one with somebody, I generally tend to just do a quick little double check scan around to make sure that it's the one that I thought it was. If that's counting, then I'm probably in more trouble than I thought. But I would imagine it's smart enough to know that view hours from your own account don't track. So in that case, that's going pretty well. I got the new video set up back there, so it's kind of checks and balances. But I'll be glad to see it gone. Um, Glad indeed. And we have our glass sculpting friends. Their whole life was completely flipped upside down because most of their income comes from them touring around, going to like Comic Con and Emerald City Comic Con and all those sorts of things all over everywhere. Designer Con, there's a lot of cons, and actually having a booth where they can set their stuff up and sell things to crowds. And that source of revenue was completely taken from them because all of that stuff completely shut down. So they switched to streaming on Twitch and trying to get stuff going there, which carried them through. And now they're at a point where they can use a new shop. So that is good news for that. So there are some upsides, but everybody's really glad to be, getting rid of the year, I'm sure. Hopefully with Sublime 4 the channel statistics shoot up even more. I'm hoping so. I'm getting perilously close to shooting John a message on the Discord and saying, you know how way back in 2019, October, no, November 2019. Yeah, it's been that long, right? Time is completely screwed up. You said you didn't want this publicly brooded about. Well, I mean, I've really kept to that. I make sort of mention to it. I've made mention to it a couple of times, and even then, only recently because we're seeing more and more mentions of Sublime 4 in the forum and in the Discord, and the information is sort of getting its way out there. I still don't want to just create a bunch of Sublime 4 videos, but it would be nice to be able to just wing a bunch of those off, particularly because I have the new video set up back there that I could actually leave set up. I could just spend like 3 or 4 days and just record a ton of stuff and then edit it all down and have a bunch of things. But I don't want to do that if it's going to make John mad. Hmm. Also, the thought occurred that I could make them and make them unlisted so that I could still share them in the Discord for people that ask questions like how to have multiple versions running simultaneously and stuff. And then those could always be published publicly later to the benefit of them already having likes and views as they go live, which always tends to confuse people. Okay. Let's do this. So the first thing that we're going to check here, no, I guess we don't like that. I guess we like that better. The first, what we're trying to do here is saying in this window, in this particular group, is there any modifications? So the first thing we're going to do is get the group or the view from the group and then say, if the change count in this view is the same as the change count in the setting, we're inting that to make sure that it comes back as a number, although I guess it would, wouldn't it? That's not anything we necessarily need to worry about. Okay, that's technically an issue, so maybe we don't bother with that. Something we can tweak at a later date, because there's only so much I'm willing to do here. If the change count is the same as what the stored change count is, then there's absolutely nothing different about this. So go ahead and return false. And then the next one would be if view.subster sublime.region 0 len view is equal to view.settings get YTE content, then we can do this. And return false. I don't think it's private anymore. There's a public changelog gist, packages and tracker are public. Yeah, it is noted on the forum. So, I mean, at this point, it's been a year. People know about it, so it's probably cool. But I don't know. I guess I'm just one of those people that, John said that he wanted a thing, and I wouldn't want to go against that. And that's why I would ask just to see. I mean, in all likelihood, he would say, go nuts. But we're getting really close to that particular point now because I'm itching to get that stuff down. And as you mentioned, I'm imagining that when the news actually goes public, uh, being riding the wave of that and being one of the few or only people to have a video available that talks about Sublime 4 is probably going to drive a lot of traffic because most sites that I ever and channels that I ever look at that have Sublime Text stuff aren't talking about new versions. They're talking about a blog post that they read 3 years ago about these 3 really great packages for Sublime Text 2 that you should install if you're going to be working with CSS that are all wildly out of date. We're going to add one extra thing in here, but not that one, which is, we'll do this. Any direct modifications? No, we don't need to comment that. This one is if there hasn't been any changes, then the change count is still the same. And it doesn't do anything. And this has a default value here. So if you ran this on a view that didn't have this setting already, then this would cause it to say the change count is still the same. And then, or it would cause this to fail, I should say, and fall through into here where it does this one. So if in the case where you typed some stuff and then undid it, the change count goes up, but the text actually goes back to the way it was. So if we were to gather the actual content of the view and compare it against the persisted version of it, which here we're just doing in a setting to make sure that it tracks per view and we don't have to have some sort of global and track it when views close and blah, blah, blah. Let the settings do that. And we know that these aren't going to be overly large anyway. Then we know the content is the same, but if we get here, the change count is different. which means that someone did a type in and then undo. So we can just set the change count setting back to what it currently is set to so that the next time this runs, it doesn't have to do that extraction again. I think at that point it was more unstable than what it is now. Yeah, I think that was it's sort of a funny thing too. Ashwin also says he's been using it daily and the number of times it's crashed equals my non-existent luck to win a lottery. Yeah, tell me about it. I've had it crash once, maybe twice, and I knew it was going to happen before it happened because it was one of those nights where I was up late playing with Sublime as I do, and the change log, a new announcement popped up, and while I was still, downloading it, someone else was saying like, "Oh, this is totally crashing for me," and then I could say, "Yep, crashes for me too," and then it was fixed like a couple hours later or the next day. Generally, in every situation that I can think of where there was something wrong with the build and it crashed like that, I went to bed, and when I woke up 6 hours later, there was already a new build that fixed the problem. So it's definitely like super stable. I think part of the reason was stability, and part of it was until they make it publicly known that it exists, they're free to take any of the features that have existed in the dev build so far and modify them or get rid of them entirely, which has happened to at some point. There was some stuff that was put in that was changed to something else. Once it's public, it's sort of harder to do that. I mean, it's a dev build, they still can do it, but I think they're sort of initially they were riding that we don't know where this is going to go, and then we ended up spending the better part of a year adding a ton of new API stuff so that LSP could work a lot better, which is also going to be just crazy for the amount of stuff that's happening here. Um, oop. Here's something I can share, maybe. Hang on, I got to make this window smaller. Happy New Year! Put that back over there. But that might have that whole feature thing might be something they're holding off on. That I'm envisioning in my head that the two answers that I would get out of John if I said, "Hey, do you mind if I just create some videos going over some of this stuff?" There's just like so much stuff to do that his answer is either going to be yes or no because we're still theoretically in feature flux. Although I don't know that that's how flexy can we be over a year in at this point, right? Um, I did these backwards. These should be true. Nope, I did that. I had it right the first time. It doesn't have changes if the change count is the same. If the text is the same as the previous text, it also doesn't have changes. Plus, update the change count to be the new one so that it doesn't have to keep doing this extraction all the time. Otherwise, it in fact does have some changes. Does this load? Yes, it does. Um, how about this? Let's say we can provide in a list of groups to check for changes because we're going to want to check all of them. We're never going to want to check one, but maybe we might want to check one so we make the API clever enough. So we can say if the groups that you provide is not a list, make it a list. And then we can say for group in groups, do this. Except that we need to invert the state of this, right? If we do this, because it needs to return yes if any of them have changes, but you don't want to return right away in that case. I think the next build with the ARM Mac build probably might be among the last ones with any new major features. Yeah, I think that whole, I'm pretty sure it's probably not going to go public until dependencies are a thing that are sorted out. So until we see Will asking for advice about that, I imagine that's something he would probably do. He'd probably ask the community of package developers in the Discord, because we're all power users, what we think of that. And then he's probably going to virtually slap anybody that says we need pip support with a fish for reasons that he's already outlined. That's probably going to be it. I would imagine. I don't know if ARM Macs are going to be next. I'm sensing uh, they are. Actually, I'm basing this assumption on not actually knowing just how widespread the new M1 Macs are, because there are obviously people that have them. Could you just go to the Apple Store right now and buy one, or are they like a Switch where there's like a few of them floating around? My assumption is that they're not quite fully mainstream yet, in which case we probably have to wait until they are for Sublime to track them, because if the devs have to have one, but I don't know. The virtually, oh, you like that, huh? Virtually slap with a fish. If you're an old fuddy duddy like me, then you're used to using IRC to chat. You probably did that back in the 90s, and one of the famous IRC clients is MIRC by Khaled Mardam Bey, uh, which has the dubious distinction of being something that he made freely available until it became so wildly popular he had to start charging money for it, because he was just spending all of his time, not wasting his time, spending his time working on it to no compensation, and everybody got all mad because they'd been getting it free for years. One of the things that it actually had in as a built-in thing was a command that you could slap somebody with a wet trout, or trout slap somebody. And apparently that really hit the cultural zeitgeist for me. Let's revert this. If the change count is not equal to that, then we would say print change count is different, like so, right? And then we would return. Then we would return true. It's the first view we hit where the change count is not the same as that. No, we can't do that either. Let's take that back. Because you don't want it to. Technically, it would work, the thing we just did, to say that the change count is the same. Did I go far enough? I don't think I did. The change count is different. There's definitely a change, because we still want something like this to happen. Maybe we don't. Maybe I'm borrowing trouble. I have friends that are saying Happy New Year's from uh, the east coast of Canada and the U.S., where it's currently 12:15 a.m. They're just having their New Year's, uh, and they're saying we're from the future, you know. I'm responding with, and yet you persist in not giving us the lotto numbers. uh, we're really getting hung up on the simplest possible implementation of a thing here. Oh, that's a different thing. Yeah. The one problem with this is we don't want this to return because we're doing something with groups. If we reverse the change of this, we can return true as soon as it happens. But one of the things we're trying to do is update this uh, so that it doesn't have to do it every time, which is might be an optimization that's not strictly needed, but it seems unclean not to. Yeah, I'm not a Mac user either per se. I mean, I have one, but that's only because the company gave me one while I was working on iOS applications a few years ago. So given the opportunity to buy software, I would buy it as a Windows application and not as a Mac application because when this eventually goes dead, I'm not replacing it unless I get another one free. Ditto the iPads that we have. I have two iPads, one that the company gave me as part of that project, and then one that's my own personal one, which I use to control the stream with this custom application that I created. This one I got because we had a bunch of points from a credit card that every time you spent money you got some number of points, and we switched the bank switched us to a different credit card that would end up saving money on, and part of the deal was a ridiculous number of points, and the only other thing that we could do with them besides this was like take a trip to somewhere, and we're not traveling people. So I said, yeah, give me an iPad. So once these crap out, I wouldn't replace an iPad either. Macs for me are way too expensive for what they are, and they don't really provide me personally any benefit. I don't hate a Mac. I find it kind of head scratchy that someone says that, that some people say the thing I love about Macs is they're so intuitive, or they work better for this or whatever. And those sorts of statements are entirely in the eye of the beholder. Uh, I find Linux and doing stuff in the command line way more intuitive than Mac OS, for example. Or something I like to cite when people ask this: PC keyboard has a button on it what says print screen, and you press it and it takes a screenshot and puts it on the clipboard. There's a keystroke to do that on Mac OS. They don't have, at least not on any keyboard I've ever seen, a screenshot key. Every time I needed to take a screen capture, I needed to Google to see what the key sequence was. And it's like a double, you press a sequence and then you press another one like an Emacs thing, and that's what triggers it. And there's a different one for whether you want the whole screen or part of the screen, which is definitely powerful, but you got to be taking a lot of screenshots to remember that particular keystroke, whereas just a dedicated key. So for people that use Mac OS, that's probably very intuitive because they have the experience with it. For me, not so much. But on the flip side, I find Linux more intuitive. People that don't use Linux, they're not going to find it as intuitive. It's really a weird thing to say that one thing is better than the other for reasons that are so subjective like that. Mm. But the thing that would stop me from replacing any of my Apple stuff is because it's so expensive for what I use it for, which is not a lot. But yeah, a lot of applications are coming out with, like, for example, the graphics application that I use and that Will uses is Affinity Designer, which is a illustration application, or an Adobe Illustrator like application. Basically, it's vector graphics. They also have a photo one that's just like Photoshop, and Publisher, which is like whatever the Adobe publishing thing is, InDesign. I'm not sure. They're very powerful for what they are. They don't have 100% of the capabilities, but they have like 90%, 95% of them. They're super cheap. They don't have a subscription. All of those applications are Mac OS and Windows, and they are announcing all over the show that, yeah, we have M1 support. I guess, I mean, based on stuff I've seen, they're for what they're doing. Those systems are very fast at what they do, and they use less power, which is probably the bigger thing, I would think, overall. Having more speed is nice, but getting an extra 5 hours of being able to sit in a Starbucks working on something, or without having to be that guy that parks on the plug to keep yourself plugged in, is probably a very big draw. I love that. That's why I like my Chromebook. Um, Trying to think of a nice way to do this. We don't want to return false. We want to continue in this thing. Maybe the expedient is to do something like this. Okay, so we're checking a group. We get the group. If the change count is the same as it was before, then the change count is the same. Nothing needs to happen, right? So we can type continue like so to jump up to the next thing. If we get down here, then there's going to be not changes, and inside of here there are. And the idea being that we check this first. If the change count is the same as the old one, then the change count is still the same, nothing we need to do. But if the change count is the same, then we check this and say, is the text the same as it was before? And if it is, we set that and we continue, right? I guess we might need some else's on this. Maybe we go like this. Is this going to do what we want? If the change count is not the same between this, what now, and what it was in the setting, it's not the same, then this returns false. It immediately jumps down to return true to say, yeah, there's changes. Otherwise, there is one. So we check the content. If the content is the same, we just continue into the next iteration to check the next group because we've checked both things. But if these things aren't, then we might say content is different now, like so. And then we break out of the loop, which skips over this and jumps to, no wait, that actually returns the thing, doesn't it? I guess the issue that I'm having here is if we're doing this for multiple groups, I probably could have composed it differently. But what I'm trying to do here is work in this optimization here that if it compares the content and the content is the same, but the change count is different, then update the change count to be the same without having to check that every single time. And we probably, or what I'm saying is I probably want to do that for all of the views and not just one. But this isn't going to work for that either. So maybe we're just complicating things for no good reason here. So let's take this back. This is the sort of thing that could be tweaked. Oh, except that we definitely, if we're doing it in a loop, we can't return right away, right? Okay. So let's take it back. Now that I'm thinking about it, could have thought about that a little bit more. Check this one group, and we can return or not after one group. So the change count for this is different, then it immediately returns true. We might even say that. We might even just say, for testing purposes, differences found in group, right? If it's the same, it says it's the same, and then it compares the content. If the content is different now, and then we can just immediately return. No, we can just fall through, can't we? We just have this print here so that we can actually see what it's doing. If the content of the view is different, print this, and then it's going to say differences found and go. But if it's the same, it's going to say content is the same. It's going to update the change count, and it's going to continue into the next iteration. I think this is probably what we want for this operation, if I had to guess. For this particular operation. Then down in here, authorized is just going to say doing a thing in return. So this command is now effectively short-circuited. If we were to pick it, right. If I reloaded the plugin, this is why we're testing with a video I don't care about. If we do this, it says it's doing a thing after a quick little flip-flop between things to verify that everything's cool, because it has to get the video information or update some stuff before it realizes it doesn't need to do it anymore. So that's that. Now we come down to is enabled. It needs to be a YouTube video window, and there has to be a video ID, and there has to be video details. And for this to be enabled, this needs to be groups.changes, self.window, and 0, 1, and 2. That's the theory of what we actually want to have happen here. So we might need to close this and reopen it just to make for absolute certain. Oh, you know what? Before we even get into that, we're going to do this too. When you have this many logs going for every time the menu opens, it's handy to have an extra sentinel in there to let you know when things have gone a little weird for you. And then we say new, no, we say details on this thing and grab the end card video. I could just add a binding for that realistically. Okay, so console fully empty in this window, and commit changes to YouTube is disabled because we could see if we actually look in here, the change count is still the same, and then it says content is still the same, just double checking. Oh, it's doing that when I necessarily didn't want it to. Darn, part of this operation is to not have to do this part. I guess we maybe want this. If the change count is the same, we don't need to do anything with this. Nothing has been modified in this view. Cycle back to the next one. Otherwise, check if the content is different. And if the content is still the same, we still want to continue. We want to fix the indent so it doesn't get all up in our business. If the change count is different, then we check the content. If the content is the same, we update the change count and continue into the next loop. Otherwise, we say the content is different now just to know we say there's differences. Okay, so let's do that and that. And let's see. If I open the menu, group 0, the change is still the same. It's still the same. It's still the same. Okay, and then I push and add something in. And now we get, it is enabled. Probably should have cleared the thing there. But the last one is differences found in 1. Why did that print twice? For 0, change count is still the same. For 1, the content is different now. It knows the content is different, but it didn't actually log anything. But it knows that there's a difference there. So that's good. And then if I undo, for our purposes, I'm going to clear this console so that our life is a little better. And, oh, it actually it goes twice. That's weird. Now it's still the same. In 1, the content is the same. In 2, the content is the same. Well, it works, but it seems kind of... Oh, yeah. This is why this is the reason why we want to actually modify this. Is enabled is... No, wait a minute. Wait a minute. When the menu opens, it needs to ask if it's enabled so that it can update it. We only have is enabled. Does this have an is visible? That's kind of interesting. I'm not 100% sure why it would be doing it twice. When you run the command, it's going to set timeout async, but it doesn't actually run any actual command when the thing comes back. It just invokes methods in the existing class when it comes back. That is weird. In any case, there's no situation in which it can say difference is found without saying what's different, right? If it gets inside here, it prints. If it doesn't get inside here, then if it gets inside here, it prints. And if it doesn't get inside here, it has to print. Then it prints that one. I'm not gonna lie, this is kinda sorta confusing me just a little bit. Clear console. I'm not... The thing that's confusing me is that it's being invoked twice primarily. So if I did this, then group 0, the content is different now. Is it though? Yeah. Oh, I moved the thing down. In this one, the content is different now. There's differences found in 0. So it checked group 0 and said content is different now. Double checking the code, which is in this tab. It said checking the group and content is different now. All right. I mean, yeah. Let's do that just cuz. But I think we've now potentially... Oh, this is actually going to be interesting. It still knows. This is another reason why I like to use settings to persist data instead of trying to store it in a global. The settings are persisted with the view, which includes across restart. So even if plugins reload, you still get to keep this information. So it knows that group 0 up here has something changed. And if I did it again, everything is still kosher, so the command is not actually modified. And if I type something in this one, then now group 1 is different, but I can undo and it's all the same. And I could add something in here, press the correct key. There's now differences found in 2, undo, it's still the same. We could go A, and A, clear this, and there's differences in 0. That's not 0 though. There's differences in 0. There's differences in 2. That really seems like it's working to me. Let's do a thing. The content is the same, we're good, but update the stored change count. So we don't need to do this next time. This is the thing that we would like to actually see being jigged in there, and I think we were. That one's more obvious. We don't need to do anything there. Those ones are going to be real obvious, real fast. So what we want is something where the change count is different, but the content is the same, is what we're going for here as a test, right? So if we clear this console and I go that way and that way, now the change count is different, but the content is the same. So we see content is still the same in the first one. And then in the second one, it doesn't say that because it updated it. So the second time it ran it, it didn't have to grab the content out. So that is totally doing what we would like to do. Nice. So let's go and clobber out all the things that are prints because they are not needed, which means this ain't needed and this ain't needed. One of the interesting things about the Lua programming language is that it doesn't have the concept of break and continue. You can't get it to stop a loop from the middle. Or you can get it to stop in the middle, but you can't get it to jump back to the top with a continue. One of those two things. I'm a little hazy on it now, but in that language, you need to flip the state of what you're checking or check if you should not be continuing yourself at the top of the loop and breaking out. Or use goto because Lua actually has goto in it as well. It's one of those things that people tend to get up in arms about in the in their mailing list and such. I'm pretty happy with this. Something I did just took 6.8% CPU. That's interesting. The little application I have that tracks the stream status and allows me to control stuff has a bar graph, or sorry, a line chart that's continuously scrolling of CPU usage, but it bobbles between 3.1 and 3.3% CPU, say, or maybe 5%. So mostly it's just a line that's ridiculously jaggy so that you can actually see the peaks. The given group or groups to see if they have any changes made to them. This is going to return none. This is always going to return changes, right? Yeah. Have not used goto, but I think in general a bad idea when it comes to jumping and executing arbitrary lines. Hard agree. C is a language that has goto. You generally think long and hard about actually implementing it. In all of the years that I've been coding C, which is I've been working at the company for 20 years and I knew C before I worked at the company because I knew C before I went to college, and I went to college in 93, but I was in probably early 90s is how long I've been writing C code. I've come across the kind of situation where a goto actually makes the code simpler and easier to understand 2 times. And both of them were probably in the same sort of deal. The kind of situation where there's a lot of switch statements inside of other switch statements, and the best way to be in a like an inner nested switch and say when this situation is true and this situation is true and this situation is true, we're done. What we don't need to do any of the encompassing everything. We just need to go and continue on with what we were doing, but it's not part of a function, so you can't just return. You use a goto to jump to the end. It's a very, very slim circumstance in which goto does anything other than just make your code be really convoluted and hard to follow. See, for example, assembly language, which is more or less all go-tos all the time. And nobody even wants to write that anymore. That's why we have C compilers. Um, I believe that the reason that Lua has go-tos in it is because one of the things that you can do with it is generate code. And in that case, you might be doing something that from a machine generated point of view, it's easier to track where your jumps are going to be by writing out unique labels and going using goto to jump execution to them in a way that you're never actually going to be touching that code yourself. One last thing to fiddle here. We're using view settings a lot. So let's say s is equal to view.settings like this. And then if we were to copy this, we could say this one and this one and this one could be this, which just makes that look a little bit nicer, maybe. One of those things we see only really used in two places, and yet it's S and not settings. I mean, one of those things, right? This isn't going to work, right? Because the return value is a settings object. That's, yeah, we don't want, we want that to look more like this, I believe. I mean, I guess I just looked at that in that font thing, didn't I? Yeah. One of those things where the syntax highlighting was actually like, oh, that can't be right. I swear when I'm writing code and I'm not sort of keeping up a running commentary and interacting with the chat and such, I don't make nearly as many silly mistakes. Silly mistakes still happen, make no mistake, but sometimes it's harder to keep the big picture of stuff in mind while you're narrating what's going on. One of the fun things about the stream, though, I think it's interesting anyway. What's this? Is this something that needs to be worried about? No. No, it's not. Okay. So let's just double check this actually seems to do what we want it to. Oh, sorry. Let's reload and clear the console and verify. Oh, look at that. We broke it real good. Oh, I didn't change this one. Like I said, that's probably the sort of thing that I would have foolishly did either way. So now it is got changes. Now it doesn't. Now it does have changes. Now it doesn't. Now it does have changes. Now it doesn't. Not too shabby. Oh, yeah. Ashwin's saying one of the reasons I should distract you less. No, please distract away. I'd say I have worked for the same company for 20 years, right? Yeah. I guess slightly more than that because it was almost at the end of a year, but not quite. It's in the middle of December or something. And all of that time, I've always, except for the last 5 years, I've always been in an office with at least one other person. I mean, my part of the company is in British Columbia, which is on the west coast of Canada. All my head office is on the east coast ish in Ontario, which is to the right of the middle, if you will, um, above New York and stuff. So it's fairly close to the coast. And we're multinational, so there's people all over everywhere as well. But because it was only ever at most four of us in this province, and then two for the longest period of time, we always worked together in the same office. And we spent a lot of time, sitting. I would be sitting here, and my coworker's desk would be 20 feet behind me, the exact same desk, but with the U facing the other way, so our backs were to each other. But we could always spin chairs around and talk and discuss problems and stuff that we were working on. And that continued right up until him and his wife bought a house way up north in British Columbia and moved up there. And then from that point on, I started working from my own house instead of from our shared office space. And I haven't really had that level of uh, discourse with other people, except for in the Discord and in the forum and stuff, but not in this sort of, conversational way like this. So it's really, especially in a year like 2020, with not having a lot of people to talk to in general. I mean, except for meetings, but I'm not counting meetings in things that are enjoyable, because a lot of the time I'm usually using my fidget cube to fidget things, or this other fidget cube to fidget things, or this little spinny fidget ball. Probably can't see that. It's a desk toy that you just spin and it has a spiral on it. I got several actual fidget spinners over here. This one looks like Batman. I also have one that lights up. For the longest time, I had a slinky until I hit myself in the face with it once too often. Meetings, they're all about distracting yourself from the talking and not the fun of actually interacting with people this way, especially when you have cool questions like expanding the selection to the scope, or the scope to the selection. Yeah, I said that right the first way. You know what I'm talking about. But cool. Okay, so this is actually doing what we want still, even though I modified this. Great. It will work in other cases. No, it won't. Setup or, okay. Yeah, we'll just say that. We could explain in what situations you wouldn't. Let's change this to editor groups. Now, here's the thing. Do we want to do this? Is there another case where we might actually want this? My general disposition for something like this is a handy thing to have. Throw it in the API, and then anything that wants it can have it. But I also have the notion that if something like this is only going to be in one spot and it is hoisted out to be its own thing, we could easily grab it out of here and put it somewhere else the very first time we actually need it. And until then, we don't. And by that point, maybe we'll have another idea for what the name should be. So let's just do that, and call it good, I say. I mean, it took us quite a while to actually get to this point, but that's neither here nor there. I have a key bound to that, don't I? Yeah. For a long time, I used the Git package and Sublimerge, not Sublime Merge, but Sublimerge, a different package, to actually work on. Oh, don't commit that stuff. We want to commit stage this hunk, just this hunk, thank you, and this hunk. Oh, shoot. Shoot, shoot, shoot. No, no, no. This is a twofer. I forgot. This one first. store change count and contents in scratch buffers is the first thing to change. And then the next one is this hunk and this one, but not that one. Only commit when there are new changes to commit. Thus, okay, then we can go ahead and discard that, which is going to mean that if I do this, there's nothing for me to actually change here, no matter how much I fiddle around with this stuff. Now it wants to do it, but if I undo enough times in all of the, well, one too many, I mean, now it's going to commit. That's also kind of an issue. Speaking of, I think that's actually something I solved in Override Audit, but I don't remember how I did it. But yeah, all good. Let's check that real quick. I don't remember what my command names are. Something to do in this general area. No. All right, we'll just look over here then. Your group has changes, works in with multi-selection. I'm gonna say yes. If you mean actual selection text, because it doesn't actually modify anything about the selection per se. Unless you meant something different there. Command we're looking for, context create override. Yeah, that is pretty handy, isn't it? It's been a bug in my brain since I mentioned a version of that browses through the API. My thought was I should add something to the command palette that opens the plugin files in a read-only view so that every time I want one, I don't have to open a terminal and CD into local and then go into Sublime Text and then lib and then Python 38 and then subl minus end the thing. Especially on Windows, because that's way more of a hassle there than it is here on Linux. And the list of things to do, but you know, it's Devember. We gotta do what we can do here, right? Snorri puppy is Snorri. The thing that we are doing is creating an override. Set up new override view is something. Here I am doing that thing that's not generally recommended, where set up new override view needs to happen potentially after is loading is called, and the most expedient way to pull that out is to check if it's loading and just schedule it to be called. File is left as a scratch buffer until the first modification. Right. So where's the event listeners in this? Because here's the issue, quote unquote, that we're actually having here. Okay, I'm going to close this window. If in this window I said the correct key binding and said create override like this, and then I choose something like that I've never done before, what this has actually done is create a tab, grab the content of this out of the Sublime package file, and append it into here. As a matter of fact, we would expect that to be the case, right? If I undo, I can't undo this. And if I undo, it brings it back to here. How did I implement this? Is the thing that I'm curious about. Actually, I guess I'm probably an idiot. It's probably actually loading it from the thing. I'm not doing it manually in this particular case. So we're probably barking up the wrong tree for something here. So let's go ahead and just not worry about that per se. I think that's the deal. That's one of the optimizations. Package Resource Viewer does what this is doing. It creates a tab and then it grabs the content out by using sublime.loadResource for the file that you want to load, like packages, user thing. Only you'd pick like a correct one, and then it does append to stick it in. So if you use Package Resource Viewer, you can undo all the way to the point where the buffer was empty, which irritated the bejeebers out of me. So in mine, I actually do it a different way. I actually use the open file command to open it from the underlying package file directly and then fiddle the state of things. That's why that code we were just looking at needs to happen on load, because you can't modify a buffer to be scratch or not scratch or any of those other things while its content is still loading. You have to wait until it's done. So we kind of have an issue with that, which is not that. If we said edit details and chose a video like this, we can actually undo and get ourselves to a point where there is none, like this, right? Is that that's not done yet? Let me swap it over though, which is irritating to say the least. And now it's different. So I think we might, taking the executive decision of there's no circumstance in which you would ever want to have an empty video title. And in fact, you can't. You can't set the description without setting the title. The documentation for the API tells us as much. When we were looking at it the other day, when we do the update thing, and it has the list of things that you can do, it says this is only required if the request updates the resources snippet. So if you update the snippet as a whole, you have to include the title. So there's no way to not have an empty title. Otherwise, it generates you an error. And if you wanted to update the tags or the description, then you would have to have a title. So there's no way that the title of the video can ever be empty. You probably don't want the description of a video to ever be empty either. Tags. I mean, if we're talking about people actually working with YouTube in a way where they want people to watch their videos, you most certainly want to have text in the description and in the tags. So what we could do is make this command disable itself if any of these views is completely empty, right? Yeah. If the content of a view was completely empty, then don't allow it to commit. That sounds like something we'd want, right? We don't want to get into a position where we type some stuff and say, you know what, I changed my mind, hit this too many times and blow something away. So let's say I'm still in. Did I close the wrong thing? I bet I did, didn't I? Yeah. Huh. I don't remember ever seeing that being displayed as a exception like that before. Simplistically, we could put a line in here as simple as this. Mm, mm, this would do it. Let's just check it. Simplistically, never allow an empty view to count as changes, so we don't clobber data with nothing. And if that was the case, then if I undid all of these, it is no longer available until we do this operation. So still no, and then still no, but make a change. It works. I think I like that. So let's just augment that. We'll do it as a separate commit. Make empty edit views block updates. This is the sort of situation where it's mildly crunky for our own purposes here. The comment justifies why we're doing this. If we ever wanted to bump this out into something else, then we wouldn't do this here. We'd need to add an extra test because in the generic sense, asking for changes, this one is making the very specific decision that nothing that's empty, if any of them is empty, it's not allowed to populate up. Worst case scenario, put a period in there or something. But we have that going. So that means that what we can do now is a little bit of this action. So let's close that and go this one. I'm going to do a couple of things here. The gist of that is I don't want to be able to use the key binding to create a new view in this window where there are no tabs. And as such, we're very unhappy. But I'm kind of surprised that these all have names, but they don't show up as open files for the purposes of seeing all of the open files. That's interesting. Is there a setting that makes GoToAnything only show files from the current group when there's an open folder? No open folder? I mean, because obviously this is going to be all of them, right? It's kind of weird. We'll worry about that later. But yeah, I don't want to be able to do that. So what we're going to do is say that's the case there. And under Windows, similar. And under OS X, I'm going to assume that's going to be super N. But when in doubt, check it out. That's right. Okay. So with those three things, this is just going to be its own separate little one of these. Whoops. Block the key for creating a new tab. Oh, probably should have staged all the files, right? We'll amend the previous commit. We're all happy with that. Now the next one is one that we're going to actually put up at the top. So copy that. This is going to be Control plus S. And the command is going to be commit video details, right? This doesn't even take any arguments. Yeah, double checking. YouTube editor commit details is the key that we're looking for. And that'll actually work because this is actually in the Python 3.3 plugin host. So the theory is, and it's just a theory, mind you, that Control S and video details successfully updated. Exactly what we want. That is boss. Okay, the same thing should work here, right? Yes. I guess the issue, such as it is that now, haha, the other part of the operation we need to do. Haha, okay. I just tweaked on something that I knew that we definitely had to remember to do. So I'm going to copy that one and go for Windows, do the same thing, like so. And for this is going to be super plus S, like so. Potential worry about hitting those keys over here, but these the image sheet doesn't have a view associated with it, so text commands won't execute. So none of those things are anything we need to worry about. So the next bit is connect saving. Is a thing we want to do. And once again, I did not click the button I thought I did. Amend previous commit. Great. Now, here's the issue that we're having here. This thinks that it needs to be committed, but clearly it's not. And then we close this and then we say edit details and pick that one. And it's the same stuff, but now it's not. And the reason for that is if I hit space and go, it's updated. And then if I undo, it puts it back to there. Now it thinks it's not because it's not updating its internal state. So that's something that we need to do here. Let's close that and zoom that back out. We need to do something similar to this. Oh, handy. Get new data is a thing that we totally have in there, right? Okay, cool. Def update stored data. Actually, let's even do this in a slightly different way. Let's do this. Updated first, say it was saved. That way the log and this only happen if this actually successfully calls, right? Which is good. Update the setting. Then we need to, this is an example of wanting to make a change to a file without, what's a good way to do this? I mean, I know a couple of ways to do it. This is an example of, this isn't a text command. And even if it was, we're going to modify views that aren't the current view. So to modify the content of any particular view, we could say view.run command select all to select all the text, and then view.run command left delete, which is built in, and then view.run command append with characters of new text. This is something that we could do to select all the text in the buffer, delete it, and then replace it with new text. And if we did this for groups 0, 1, and 2, we could update the title, the description, and the tags directly inside of this thing. Which is something that we actually don't need to do here. Now that I'm thinking about it, it's the other parts we want to modify. So that's good. Whatever was the text was what was actually sent up, right? Yeah, I was sort of thinking of that the other way. Phew. Um, we need to do a couple of things here. Hmm. For group in range 3, we don't need to get the, that's why I was thinking of, I was doing something like that. View is equal to self dot window dot views in group 0, right? Oh, overcomplicating. Those two settings that we have here are YTE change count, which we would set to view.changeCount, and view.settings.set YTE content to view.substir sublime.region 0 length of view. And that's all we need to do for this, right? And are we saving anything by redacting away this much to do that? No, we're not. Not even if we change the view to V. So the general gist of this is that when we call update stored data, it actually updates the dictionary behind the scenes. And then also for the first 3 groups, it gathers the view, changes the change count to be whatever it is currently, and the stores the content and puts that in there too. This one's probably not technically needed, but we want to make sure that this is, as much as possible, knows exactly that everything is the same as it was previously. With this in place, we don't need this pass anymore. We can reload that. Now we would find that this situation works the way that we expect. We say we want to edit the details for a video, and we grab one, like the one that we're not afraid of breaking, like so, right? And then this is not going to let us do anything because we haven't made any changes. But we might say this is defunct, for example. And the menu says it's going to work, and we hit the key. It's successfully updated. We know that must mean it worked. And now the command is commented out. But if we wanted to, we could undo back to a certain state, and then we could put it back to the way that we originally had it if we wanted to. I like that. So for that one, did I add too many? I must have had 2 in there and I didn't mean to. We're calling update stored data instead of this, which now happens down here. YTE video details for self-window settings. And then for all of those views, update their change count and content, which is what we use to track that. So we can stage all, and yes, I meant to do that, and then say update internal state on commit. And we probably want to move that down a couple, right? So maybe even one more. So only commit when there are new changes to commit. Make sure that we update the state for things. Make empty views block updates because we discovered that. Then we make block key bindings for that. And actually, you know what? Let's move this one down too. Now that I'm thinking about it logically, this is all of the things we wanted to do for that. This is an unrelated thing. That commit shouldn't be in the middle. And realistically, these should all be in branches. And if this wasn't Devember, that's probably what I would do. I would put them all in branches and merge them over, but good enough. We are rolling here. And I guess one last thing that I'd like to do, and it's going to relate to doing the same thing that this is doing, is, and let's play with it and see. Um, uh, Revert details, like so. Um, we're not going to care about this. No, sir, we are not. Dun, dun. And we're going to say this YouTube editor revert details and say refetch the video data, ignoring the cache, and update the views in the window. To contain that data. Perfect. We're not going to need that. Run and if verified, print. We are going to do a thing. Else. Okay. We'll work out the actual details of this thing later. But for right now, as a matter of fact, we'll even do this. We don't want this, and we don't want this. We don't want, well, we probably want those things. Let's leave that in there for the time being. So commit video details is, sorry, revert details is a new thing. Hey, look, I saved this as another file, but it still thinks that's the one that's there. That's kind of interesting. Okay, let's add in a revert details here. From dot revert details import this thing. Oops. Copy, thank you. And then here and here. Cool. That's going to be all we need for that. This is theoretically, this isn't going to do squat doodle right now, which is what we like. We could even use an input handler for this thing. And I was going to use a dialog box, but maybe we don't want a dialog box. I guess we need to decide that first. The idea behind this is you're going to run it, and if verified is false, it's going to prompt with you, do you want to do this? Which technically isn't super necessary because all we're going to do is update the contents with what we have. I mean, we could actually dump the buffers entirely, which would actually require you to validate this. And when you call this with verified is true, that's the part where it actually assumes that what it's going to do is the thing that you want it to do. If we want to do that in a dialog, then we can go ahead and commit this right now and add it to the menu. I don't think we want to add a key binding for it. If we want to use an input handler, then we need to know that now, because the thing that you put in the menu to invoke a command from the input with an input handler is different than what it would be if you were using a regular thing. This is what that would look like. Do we have something like this already? I am using dialog boxes already. So I think that means we're going to want to do it that way. I'm not going to put a key binding on this because it's too easy for you to do something silly. But huh. This is going to be a tricky one to implement, because if we want to revert changes, we have to know what the data actually looked like. Right? We might need to rethink this and ponder on doing something different. The idea behind this is you make some changes and you decide you don't want them and you want to revert, which technically is just the same as undoing a bunch of times. But if you wanted it to actually undo all of your changes in all of the buffers, you probably want it to match what's last saved, which means all it's going to do is pull them out of those settings, right? Revert is different from refresh, which would have it actually fetch data down and then clobber it in. So revert changes might not actually be helpful to us. So maybe, yeah, maybe we let's do a little bit of that. Easy enough to put back should we desire. But yeah, you go away now. Thinking on it, that might not actually be what we would like to do. Um, so one last thing to ponder then. This more or less does what I would like something like this to do, except for the idea of if we picked something that actually has something valid. Oops. Here's the spitball on how this would actually work. I wonder. I'm just gonna experiment with something here. Oh, also, we have untold levels of success. Here's what we're gonna do to test this bad boy, so to speak. I need to find the appropriate link. We can actually test the workflow that we would like to do here, is the thing, and see in an organic fashion exactly what we might try to do. But first, I need to find this thing. Here we go. If we pick this, go like so. This one's nice and short. So I'm gonna do this and this. Okay. just getting something going over here. We're going to go to downloads and move like so, right? Cool. Okay, move that to videos like this. And we hit that, go away, type exit appropriately. Now, here's what we're going to do. For our purposes here, we're going to close this. I wonder, you know what I should do? Here's what we're going to do real quick like. We're going to close that. I should fix that thumbnail too, but this whole thing is going to go away when all is said and done. Get video link by tag, edit details, flush cache data, new window, insert table of contents. There's a couple that we might want to have in here. Before we do the thing that I just said we were going to do, we might say YouTube editor, open YouTube Studio, and there might be a command for that. And like this, and view YouTube channel, right? And that might have a command too. Both of these things are going to do the same thing. So what we might say is YouTube editor view channel, naively. But what we do know is that this first one is going to be missing a colon, and the second one's going to be missing a colon. This one's going to open the browser on YouTube Studio, which would look like this. There you are. There you are, my friend. Which is going to have this specific thing. So we'd actually have to know our own channel in order to view this thing, right? Maketh the sense. If we knew that, we could easily create this URL and open it in the browser. We already know how to do that. And we might also want to do a little something like this, which again is identical, right? It's got the channel pajigi there, and then there's just this particular URL. So we're just going to do this, and we're going to do this. I'm going to move, well, actually, I'll just move this over here for the time being, right? Yeah, oh, that's sort of confusing me. The opening a light theme website and going, it should be its I know, right? The goggles, they do nothing. I wonder. Whoops. Happy New Year! Still a little bit to go for me, but I have been sort of celebrating the new year for quite some time now. Since a lot of the people I know are in other parts of the world, like I have a lot of friends in Europe and Asia and such that have time zones well in advance of mine. Even my coworkers work in a time zone that's 3 hours ahead, so it's been their new year. Here's hoping that this year is better than the other one. I mean, we got Sublime Text 4 to look for, right? So that's cool. I'm gonna do this real quick. Like, we're gonna need this. We're gonna need a command to open those two pages. The only thing that's different between the two of them is the URL that it creates, right? Whether it opens in Studio or opens the channel, the URL is different. The difference between the two of them, but it's the same in that it requires the channel ID to be able to actually do the thing. So what if we did this? And then, do I have one of these with args? I do, and it's in this style, is it? Okay. This is weird, man. But I did it before, so I'm gonna have to keep doing it again. How do you pronounce your name? Is it Divyanch? I'm very terrible at pronouncing a lot of stuff. But in any case, welcome to the stream, I should say. I shouldn't just respond to your comment by wishing you a happy new year as well. Welcome to the stream. We've been going for quite some time now. We're getting close to the end of stuff that we're going to fiddle with for this package for the purposes of November. Still going to work for this. In the new year, we're going to go back to, at least for a while, single live streams on Tuesdays. I like the idea of doing multiple live streams, especially when there's interesting stuff to work on. So we might flip the schedule up a little bit, but for the first week back, we're going to take a little bit of a break. As a matter of fact, I was going to actually go short today, but I'm having fun playing with stuff. So it's going to look something like this for that one and for a second one. And maybe we could even augment this a little bit for other things later. We're going to copy that one out and plunk it in here. Now, here's what's different between these two things. This one is the actual channel. And this one is YouTube Studio. And I think kind of see what is going to be happening here, because both of those things are more or less the same. Just double checking that I wasn't on crack there. So if we had a hypothetical command that could just expand variables in a string and then open that URL, we don't need two commands. We need one, because this is going to, both commands would be exactly identical. This also opens us up to the idea of being able to do this for a video ID as well, and a time code, which we already have commands for. We'd have to rework a little bit of stuff to make it actually pull that. But this could actually do that if we wanted it to. So let's go ahead and throw this in. We don't need this one anymore. I really don't like the way those ones are spaced out all funky, so I might have to fix these now. This is a side effect of using package dev, which uses a different indent for these files than I do. But yeah, okay. So that's not going to do anything yet until we actually create the command. Unfortunately, we just had a command and then we clonked it away. What do we do that actually needs to have a video ID? We have something along the lines of get video link. This one uses settings, so that's less interesting for us, for our purposes here. Details. This one is, yeah, so let us put that back, put this over here. I wonder if there's some way to have a callback that gets the command's name of the clicked item in the command palette. Technically, you can now use an event listener to listen for on window command and on text command. You can't necessarily tell that they came from the command palette unless you also listened to know that the command to open the command palette was the last one that came opened, though. that didn't work for the longest time. When the first builds of Sublime came out that had input handlers support, that was the point at which command logging for commands in the command palette went away, and they were broken for a long time. But somewhere along the Sublime 4 chain, that was fixed. At least I seem to recall that it was fixed, because I was surprised the other day to notice that something I was doing was actually logged in a way that I expected, which is why the video on the channel about finding the commands that are associated with things, and I said that you could turn on logging and it doesn't work currently, it might in the future. That was the change that did that. We just need a simple command here, right? So let's do this one. We'll just plunk this one over here. We'll call it open link. The actual command we created was called YouTube editor open URL. Well, that's unfortunate. YouTube editor open URL. It's not going to be YouTube video select. That's not the thing we want for this. We want YouTube request for this one. We're not actually going to be prompting anybody for anything. And it's going to be an application command. Yeah, it is. Okay. Given expand variables related to the current user's YouTube channel and videos, and open them in the default browser, is what this is going to do. That's how simple this needs to be. We format that. We pull this out. Because we're using this, we're still going to have our authorized thing. Where's an example of this being used? Oh, I guess that one that we've been working with all this time, right? Okay. Did I do the wrong? Let's close that. We'll leave this one here. YouTube request. Yeah, so this would be authorized. So when we're authorized, we need to make a request, and when we get the response to that request, that's where we actually do the thing that we want to do. We don't need any of this stuff here in order to do this particular thing. And the request we want is, look, it's doing that thing again that I can never get it to do. Channel details, channel list is the thing that we want. Okay, let's close that. We don't need to provide any arguments for that, right? I guess I probably should have checked that. Channel details requires that. Channel list does not, because it's just going to give you the list of things. Right, so let's do this. We don't need any of these things. We just need to do that. And then def channel list self request result print result. So we can verify to ourselves what this thing is actually doing. I'm reloading the plugin, but that's not going to have any effect on anything. We also want to do a little bit of this action. And this. Just so that it has the thing that we want. We don't need to. I think YouTube request is automatically going to do what we want for our is enabled thing here, which is if we don't have credentials, don't appear. Having credentials means that the user is actually logged in with the commands up here. So if you're logged out, pretty much the only commands that actually appear anywhere in the menu or the command or in the command palette. The only ones that are actually active, for the most part, are ones that require you to have be logged in. There's probably some other commands as an edge case that currently aren't doing that should do it, but that is something that's easy enough to tweak later, so we're not going to worry about it right now. But what we do need to do is copy that and go into here. And we named that one. This is the stuff we just did a moment ago. Open URL is the thing we're going to open here. We're going to put this one here. Import that after commit details, which is here. We'll actually use the correct sequence of characters. And in this one. To actually make that command available, I guess if it's going to be that way, that's not the thing that we want there. You probably should import this stuff too, right? I mean, it stands to reason. Oh, I see. I had the right idea, but the wrong thing. We're not going to need those. For what we're doing right now, we can always add them later if we need them. So if that's the case, YTE, open YouTube Studio, and here we go. Here is some stuff. There's a lot of stuff in here. It's a list of dictionaries, and the first one is channel details. No, the first one's channel list. But the list is a list of details. I guess I need word wrap after all. Featured channel URLs, not quite. External banner URL. Good grief. Where's ID in this bad boy? I wish I could search in here. I mean, what do I have to do? Something like this? Oh, there it is. Is that going to be the thing we want? Yes, yes it is. Okay. All we need to do is figure out where exactly that is in here. Let's print it. Result 0 ID. Precisely the thing that we're interested in. Result 0 ID. Good. And then we say URL is equal to sublime dot expand variables for the value of self dot run args. That, oh, and we need to provide in the variables, which is that one. Look at that, look at that beauty. It stops right exactly at the part that you want it to stop at. It's actually a nice idea. Select text, plunk it into a scratch buffer, and open it to find stuff. Yeah, especially when it's something that is one gigantic line, because it's really easy to actually select it too. Um, this, I think, should do what we want. So if we did this, there's the studio URL. And if we did this one, there's that URL. Nicey nice. So all we need to do is say, if URL, do this. And just like that, if I was to close this window and then open a new window over here, make sure that's the last one they interacted with. If I said view channel, here it is. There's me. Oh, the halcyon days of times past. And nicely done. We can handle that. So that is all the stuff we need for that. Let's go ahead and commit those changes, shall we? So let's see. We added in, well, we modified some crunk there, but we added that. So let's stage that bad boy in. We added open URL command. We added open URL and open URL command and open URL command. Here's open URL command, which looks like it's ready to go. Get the list of channels. Now, what we could actually do again in the future is have this expand other things. Like you could provide it, you could get it to expand a video URL, maybe by asking for a person. If we wanted something like that, it could get it from a setting and expand the URL out. Playlists could work the same way. There's perhaps a lot of functionality for here. The reason why this is if URL do this is because run args is the arguments that the command was given when it was executed, which isn't something that normally happens in a plugin, but it's part of this YouTube request thing that is implementing a lot of the command machinery for making these requests and reacting to them, which is why underscore authorized is the point at which commands that we write here generally do something. That's the point at which we know that the user has logged in successfully and the network thread is running and it has successfully negotiated getting a token and set up all of the stuff it needs to actually make a request. And then we can say, get the channel list. The machinery of this underlying class automatically knows to invoke that and invoke a method with this name but with an underscore on the front, for which it gives you the request that it was used to execute it and the result. Because there's an optional parameter here you could use to change this, it just defaults to this with an underscore. So you can have multiple requests that all go into the same thing and then use the request that you get to know which one of them you're getting. But the actual run method under here that triggers all of this stuff captures all of the arguments to the command and stores them in self run arg so that you don't have to override that just to be able to gather them and then use super run, which I believe is something that Nawal, Nafal, someone in a previous stream asked why the star star args in run. This is why. If you happen to be watching, sir, Happy New Year, whether you're watching live or later as Memorex. Stage that one. Those are all good. So we say add commands to open URLs. Thusly. Now, the whole point of that operation was to do a little something like this. We might say we want to upload a video. Let me maximize this. And the select files, and the thing we're going to select is from videos. No, it's in downloads. No, let's hang on. Did I already do that? I did. Oh, it's the one that it's currently sitting on. My bad. I thought that was a 2021 because that one was a 2021. Ooh, this stream is already 2.2 gigs of compressed data. We're gonna open that. That's going to actually start this thing uploading in the background. This is the bit where we put in the title, and then we could put in a description if we wanted to, a thumbnail if we wanted to, a tags if we wanted to. I'm going to say next. And I can't add an end screen or cards until it's finished processing enough for you to actually be able to watch it. So we can't do anything there. Normally I would wait for something like this. Then we set how we want this to go. Let's mark it as private and then say save like this. And as soon as that's done, we can close this. It'll still keep going in the background. We can see that there. But now, if we came back to here, we need to flush the cache data so we can edit video details like this. But now, whoops. Here's the new video that's currently still uploading. So we see there's very little to no information in this thing, right? Walter likes showers. He really does. And like so. And then what I would do is hit Control S, and it's shipping that up. So if we came back to Studio in the appropriate window, which is this one, and looked at content, here's the stuff that we just did. It's still pending. It's got the title. It's got the description. It's got the tags that we specifically added it in there. Maybe. Did it not add tags? There they are. Getting a little behind the scenes of Upload Video Studio process. Indeed. Now, there's some of this that has to happen here. Oh, look, there's the little video. I made this private, right? I did. Part of this, you see, there's the visibility private. So normally when I upload videos, what I actually do is I come here, I start the upload process. It takes a lot longer because, I chose this video because it's 42 seconds long. So it's already processed in high definition. Videos that are 15 or 20 minutes in length and are a higher resolution. I guess this must be 1080. Take a lot longer to upload. Then you have to sit in the queue and wait for YouTube to process it. And the first thing it processes is the standard definition, and then it processes for high definition. So you end up with, like, say, a 320p or 380, whatever that is. Until that part is done, it is not possible to do things like edit end screen or add cards. So while it's uploading and still doing all of that business, what I normally do is say I want to edit the video details, and say I was uploading a plugin 101 video, I would pick something like this, pick the latest video like this, and then modify this. So I would change this to 21 and the topic. Change these parts. This usually stays the same. I just update that. I select all of this text, pick insert table of contents. It prompts me for the file. I pick it. Maybe I need to include some other video links in here, which is easy now because I can go title here and then do get link and have it actually prompt me for something. And then, like, this is the one I want, so I can just paste it directly in, which is, if you watched why all of this stuff is being done, this is the reason why. Then I fiddle the tags. Then once I have all of this part done, I go back into Studio, and then I need to swap over here, copy this, paste it here, copy this, scroll to the description, paste it here, copy the tags. For some reason, the tags are way down here, and they're usually under a fold for more information to be able to paste the things in there. And once that's done, I hit save. I also need to put the thumbnail in. And then I get to do something like, say, I want end screens. And what I actually want is the end screen from the latest video, which won't make a lot of sense for this one because the video requires that little template of me in the corner and stuff. But that could be in there, and then I might decide that I need a card, and you have to be able to play the video to actually see these things, which is why you have to wait for the SD thing to actually happen, and then you might say, I'm gonna stick a video card in here for this one or something. And only then can you do the thing. And this is, I bet you, what happened earlier, Ashwin. You do this and you say, I want this to be public, and then you come up here and you pick save, or it looks like it's only possible for me to do this if I do this, and then I can hit save. But more often, this is the second time that that's happened, that it's ended up still being private, even though I clicked public there. I'm going to do this. And we're also going to delete this card just because, right? So that's the general process of how I actually work this stuff. And for the purposes of this, you could actually watch this particular video. If you're watching this back later, this is probably going to disappear off of the channel because I'm trying to get these things cleaned up a tad bit. But just in the realm of actually making this viewable for people in the future, but it's going to be a little bit before I actually delete this thing. This is the exact same thing, it's just not on YouTube. That one I'm not going to delete because it's posted in various places. The YouTube video might eventually go away. Anyway, the whole point of this entire digression is that now things are a lot nicer, as we just saw. I need to come to here and actually start the video uploading, but I don't have to sit and wait at that screen to be able, and then go over to Sublime and open the thing and start fiddling with stuff. I should probably close that before something untoward happens with that one. As we saw, I got to come in here and do this stuff. So I could actually type this stuff directly in to this thing and hit save and send those changes up. And that's nice. It would still be private or unlisted or whatever. I think I generally do it as unlisted because you can add end screen cards and inter video cards to any video, but when you play them back and view them, you can't see you can't see end screens and cards in private videos, only in unlisted and public videos. And I do always, one of the last little bits of things I do before I actually schedule a video is come and click the thing and watch it all the way through to make sure that it's doing what we expect it to do. Usually I tip it up like this because anything that I see in here is going to be some ridiculously bad, like the video encode didn't work, or a transition wasn't correct, or a typo in something. And I listen back to what I'm saying too. We don't need to hear the dog barking in this particular case. That doesn't seem like it's the sort of thing that's necessarily interesting, right? So I need to come and view this anyway, so I normally upload it that way. Anyway, the point of all that is there is a little bit, in order to be fully functional for this, there's a little bit more functionality that I need, which would be some kind of completions in here or snippets that give me the information that I tend to use on a regular basis. For example, this could pre-populate the common tags that are normally in my videos, like Sublime Text, and the things that people search for that would lead them to my videos. As we just saw, if we did get or edit video details and pick any particular thing, like make any build system interactive with Terminus, this sort of stuff is always the same for everything. These might not be. The format of this is the same. I always have the Sublime configuration. In fact, I need to go through all of these and configure it for the new stuff. So what's mostly different, everything is almost always the same template. What's different is this text, maybe a couple of links, and the tags that are added to things. So I need some sort of template system for injecting the defaults, and with some completions for adding in series specific things. Similar to here, the titles for all videos always start with the same CQ for a common questions, P101 for a plugin 101 video, and so on. So that's something that's kind of templatey, and there's tags that are almost always the same. So the one last thing that I definitely want to do with this would be something that would allow me to say this is a plugin 101 video, and it'll put the stub title in the top and the body and the tags for that, and this part, and then I could type in the rest. And table of contents would have to have a stub and such is the thing that has to happen next. Yeah, I was just thinking as I was doing that there should be a view video details, which is the same as edit video details, but which doesn't have the commit command or blocks it in some fashion. But yeah, I was indeed thinking that it's nice to hit it with a key. I'm happy to hit the key and then also tap space just to be sure, because I do tend to push the save key kind of compulsively. I mean, the number of times that I've accidentally stashed things, irritating, to say the least. But so that's the last sort of stuff. But as we can see here, I have, over the course of Devember, really kicked my ability to put videos up a notch, which is actually quite cool. And it is currently 11:03. I was actually going to stop after only a couple of hours, but we go long. I'm enjoying the longer streams here. So this brings to an end Devember. Kind of fitting that the last things we did here in the live stream is sort of go through the internal process of stuff that happens when I'm putting videos up, which is going to be happening sometime soon. And we're going to be using the area back there, I think, to actually record the next couple of videos as well. I might re-record some of the stuff that I've already done just to be able to use that area. A little bit more work, but I'm kind of excited about actually doing it. Anyway, that's the end of this live stream. Thanks so much for watching. We are going to be doing, of course, more live streams in the future. Count on, until you hear otherwise, the Tuesdays at 8 p.m. time slot that I've used for everything except Devember, except for next week. Next week we're going to take a bye week on that and sort of relax from a week of daily doing video stuff. It's fun in for what it is, but it's going to be nice to take that back a little bit. Of course, the next few days are going to be getting videos ready for the other channel anyway. We're probably going to keep working on YouTuberizer, but now that we'll be out of Devember, we can do other stuff as well. If you want to know when I'm going live on the channel, use the buttons down below, thumb, subscribe, and share, ring the bell notification icon, follow me on Twitter, hang out in the Discord, and you'll see me change my status when I'm live streaming as well. And hope to see you in one of those in the new year. And again, it is 56 minutes until the new year for me. I'll probably be laying in bed when that particular point happens because I'm just that kind of happening fool. But I hope you have a very happy new year and everything goes well for you. And until the new year and the new videos here on the channel and on the other channel as well, this is ODAT Nerd. Asking you to please have a sublime year. Yeah.